It's time once again for Western New York Athletics High School Football Weekly, hosted by Frank Wolf with Dick Gallagher from WGRZ High School Sports. Today's show is brought to you by Scroy Financial of West Seneca, the Paul Wolf Agency in Kenmore, CSA Prep Star, the North End Bar and Grill, Cipriano Realtors, BuffaloSportsPage.com, and by Southtown Trophies in Orchard Park, New York, a proud sponsor of the Buffalo Sports Page Athlete of the Week Award, announced each week on BuffaloSportsPage.com.
Hi, I'm Pat Scroy, president of Scroy Financial. We've been helping people realize their financial dreams for nearly 50 years. Your goals may include building wealth for a comfortable retirement, protection from the burdens of long-term care, or leaving a legacy to your children and grandchildren. With all these diverse goals, retirement planning should not be a one-size-fits-all process, and at Scroy Financial it's not. Whether you are just getting started or nearing retirement, give us a call. Plan, protect, invest. It's your life. Scroy Financial can help.
There are good hands and great hands. Hi, I'm Paul Wolf. We all know that good hands usually turn into losers. When it comes to all your insurance needs, our hands are unbeatable.
Call the Wolf at 835-9653 today.
Welcome to WNYAthletics Inside High School Football Weekly with Dick Gallagher. I am Frank Wolf. Glad you can join us for our 9th episode. The regular season is completely over for all of Section 6 from Class AA all the way down to D. The playoffs are in Week 2 for Classes A, B, and C. And we are 1 week away from 10 teams reaching New Era Field. Dick, how you doing this week, pal?
I'm doing good.
I saw you last week at that tornado in West Seneca when Canisius and St. Francis had their game. Did you make it to the end?
No, I wanted to make sure I'd be here today, so I made sure that I was also home because I've been around that before, and all of a sudden it just is bad. And when you take a look at it, they had a 45-minute delay, and then they played the game, but that was a little scary.
Yeah, it definitely was scary. It was an experience for sure. That was really my first time at Stransky. Where I spent the entire... I've gone there before and maybe caught a quarter here and there, but I've never watched an entire game of Stransky. I did. I'm glad I stuck it out, but if I knew what it was like outside, I might have had second thoughts. I was in the press box the whole time with Matt Zagai working the game, and Miguel was up there from the news and a couple other guys from the video crew and that, but we didn't know exactly how bad it was because we were consumed with other things, you know, checking scoreboard and doing stats and everything else. And you saw the lightning, you know, when we got up and looked out, the field was completely white with hail.
There was lightning and there was thunder to a certain extent. Maybe 5 minutes before the rains really came and they shut it down. I'm just surprised because usually anyone that sees that lightning, any referee whatsoever, automatically got a 20-minute delay.
Yeah. So they did get the game in, and it came down to the wire. St. Francis had a chance to win it at the end. We'll probably spend a little bit more time in that game in segment 3 when we get into the Monsignor Martin. But we want to start off with Class AA. They will begin their playoffs this Friday night. Bennett gets the #1 seed because Orchard Park lost to Lancaster last Friday, so it'll be a 1-4 matchup Friday at All High Stadium between Bennett and Orchard Park. It is a rematch of Week 6 in which Orchard Park pulled out the 23-22 victory. And on the other side of the coin, it's Lancaster at home versus Will North. That game gets started at 7:30 p.m. So you have rematches from the regular season. The higher seed in this case won both games, Bennett and Lancaster, but it's round 2. So Bennett will get another shot at Orchard Park. What do you see in that game, Dick?
Well, I think if Bennett avoids penalties or eliminates many of the penalties, they had 19, against Lancaster in the first game, and they avoid some turnovers, then they've got a real shot at making it to the championship game. Their talent is exceptional. Their speed is probably the best of any of the 4 teams. And if you take a look at pick your poison, whether it's Perry, whether it's Campbell, whether it's Smith, whether it's Clemens, and then their lines got better and their defense got stronger. So I think that when you take a look at it, Orchard Park had Lancaster 12-zip. They were dominating to a certain extent. In the second half, Lancaster makes the coaches make the changes which were necessary. And all of a sudden they come back and they win. So I'm interested to see how Orchard Park bounces back against that loss.
I agree with you. For me, in that particular game, as you mentioned, Bennett has the speed. Bennett has a way of finding themselves in that new era game. No matter what the class they seem to be in at that particular year, they find a way to get there. Orchard Park, other than Jack Sharp, I don't know if any of those players have ever been to New Era Field. I believe Jack was there a couple of years ago, maybe as a backup behind Janka the last time they went. But I don't know if any of them have ever played in a game there, whereas there's at least a player or two from Bennett that have played in these big games before.
Well, one of the things, though, in the past, Orchard Park hasn't played too many sophomores. So when you take a look at it, this will be the first experience if they get there. Their overall record is 14-8. They have the most appearances, the most victories in the 2000 era. They dominated. I think they were there for 9 consecutive times, or 9 out of 10 years. So when you take a look at this year, any of those 4 teams can win it. And it really comes down to discipline, comes down to performance, and how much the kids want it. Because my experience, at least, in the championship games is, particularly when you're in the semifinals, one of your goals is to win the championship, so you got to get by the semifinals. And then you proceed to try to win a sectional championship and move toward a state championship. You need 2 more for a section, you need 3 more for, 5 more for a state championship. So it really is going to depend on who wants it the most, who's going to be really coming to play, focused, and avoiding the turnovers, avoiding the penalties.
Sure. And right now, at this point in the season, Bennett, even though they're number 1 seed, hasn't shown that they can stay disciplined enough to move on here. That's why I think Orchard Park will be the favorite here, but we'll have to see. I mean, I know that last week Coach McDuffie held out Jai Perry for at least a quarter in their game against
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, yes.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that had an effect, and I know the play in particular Perry was penalized for by his coach, and rightfully so. But he felt really bad. I'm sure he felt really bad about fumbling the ball more than anything, and that's probably why he took it out on his helmet there. But I have a feeling McDuffie is going to have his kids ready. But until you see the flag thrown for whatever the case, that may change your focus from being committed 100% or to allowing something silly like a holding call get to you. And sometimes bad calls can spread like a wildfire on the sideline. You saw it last week with Maryville, and we'll talk about it. You know, a couple of calls, whether they're good calls or bad calls, you have to put it in the past quickly. Forget about it and move on to the next play. Can Bennett do that? I don't know, because they've shown that they haven't been able to in the past. You're going to see a lot of people picking Orchard Park in that particular game. We'll have to wait and see. They do have some of the fastest running backs in Western New York, and I think Coach McDuffie is pretty good at what he does at getting his guys up for these big games. Coach Dana, being his first time running the show, he'll have a lot to prove in this particular game, but he has shown that he can make the changes necessary and that he can win big games, because they did beat Bennett at Ohio Stadium just a couple weeks ago, so who knows, maybe they'll be able to do that again. But it's always tough to beat the same team twice in the regular season, and then again, here we are in the playoffs. So moving on to that 7:30 game out at Lancaster, Will North thoroughly outplayed by Lancaster in that Week 5 meeting, I believe it was, Week 4, Week 5, when they last played. We'll have to see if Will North can put that behind them and focus on this game here in Week 9. Do you think they can do it?
I think they could do it. I think they have the best talent in Class AA. The problem is they don't have much depth. So you have 10 of the 11 starters playing both ways. That could come back to haunt you, particularly if the weather's bad, particularly in the second half. But if you take a look at there was a few games in the middle of the season where Dylan Mann didn't get the yardage of the touchdowns. Now, last couple of games, he's lit it up, over 200 yards in 2 games, in 4 or 5 touchdowns. So and then when you go Dylan Kelly, who's got to be a Conley Cup finalist, one of the top 2-way players for North. And then if you just look at the kicking game that Max Obey did, just 5 BATs, that was a difference. I was surprised on how Hutch Tech kept that close. And maybe, who knows, the way that the playout turned out, that Mike Mamaletti might have just, had some players not playing as much, mainly saving them for the semifinals because they knew they were in.
Yeah, that very well could have been the case there. We'll, I haven't reviewed the game tape from that, but I know that for Hutch Tech, at least, I'm sure they wanted to go out swinging. For all intents and purposes, could have been Nick Tadaro's last game as an engineer coach for one reason or another. So maybe the seniors wanted to get up and play hard for Nick one last time. You never know. But Hutch Tech did a phenomenal job either way. They only lost by a point in that game. But Williamsville North is a 4 seed in large part because of those losses to Bennett and Lancaster.
If Williamsville North does not give a gift to Bennett and blow that game in the last 2 minutes of it, then the whole seedings changed.
Sure.
And Williamsville North might have been able to have the 1 seed, or they might have had the 2 seed. So I really believe that when you just have 4 teams that are pretty equal in talent, it's just going to be a matter of every kid playing the best game they ever played. If they win, playing the championship, they still have to take that game. If you play the same way you played in the game before in a semifinal, you're not going to win a championship. And every kid has to take their game to a level they don't even know that they have, but they have to, because you can see it of all the teams, 23 from West New York that won state titles.
And that's pretty much what Will North did, I believe, back in week 6 against Orchard Park, coming off of 2 straight losses, one that gift to Bennett. They had a really strong week of practice and went out and did what they had to do against Orchard Park. So if they can get back to that level of concentration, then I would expect them to show up against Lancaster and give them a much better game than they did the first time around.
Yeah, and 28-zip at halftime in that game. And so Williamsville North took over right from the opening whistle, and then we kept on going. And I think Lancaster is also an outstanding team. But then when you take a look at last week, when Jason Manziel was limited to 6 completions out of 18 passes, 1 touchdown, and then the other quarterback came in, did some good things. And I think that the key for the Legends in the playoffs and in this game are the 2 linebackers, Matt Marshner and, I'm blocking on the name, but Mahoney. I think it's Connor Mahoney. They have 66, 70 tackles apiece, and they play hard. They're physical. They have to have their best game. So it's this to me is the fun part of why you play football.
Sure.
Why you practice all year round. Go to 7-on-7, the weight lift and everything else. So we'll see.
And then in the Chuck Funky Bowl for the AA, it'll be Hutch Tech and Clarence this weekend. This Thursday, This Thursday, 7:30 p.m. I'm sorry, this Thursday, 6 p.m. And I believe that game is at Clarence.
Right.
So that's the Chuck Funky Bowl for the AA. Moving on to Class A, we'll have this Friday at 7 p.m. West Seneca West. The Indians will take on the Star Point Spartans. Another 2 excellent offenses. West Seneca West just beat Jamestown 39-18, and Star Point gets by McKinley in week 1, 52-21. And Aaron Chase had himself a game on Friday night. He had a number of receivers between Spina and Bowden, and the running back had a very good game as well. Star Point they were up 21-0 before McKinley ever took a snap on offense. I'll tell you what, though, that Kyer Fields is one of the top running backs I've seen in Western New York in some time. This kid runs with reckless abandon. He is not afraid of contact. He will run through you to get those extra yards. And it's a shame that he went down in that game, because I'll tell you, even at 21-0, when I saw him run those first 3 plays he had the ball, I'm like, this kid could keep that offense off the field and might be able to, bridge the gap here a little bit. But he ended up going out in the second series, and it is what it is for McKinley. But West Seneca West, you got John Spire, you've got the other running back, Brian Ball. 2 great running backs. You got a quarterback who can move in the pocket, throw touchdowns, and run for positive yardage. And Royce Robinson, Justin Johnson, Kyle Haydick. So they've got an explosive offense too. Maybe even a little bit more I believe they are more dynamic in start point in the fact that they can run the ball, plus they got that big offensive line.
I think with start point, if you look at Chase, for example, he ran at 80 yards rushing last week, and that's huge for him because it was mostly just passing. When you take a look at what he's done in the 8 games, with the exception of West Seneca East game, he's dominated. However, I think the West Seneca West is the best team in the area. They've got 23 consecutive wins, and I think the key is Starpoint ran more last week, and they're going to have to get yardage running, not just passing. But if you take a look at Justin Johnson, Kyle Haydick, and Brian Baum, they're one of the best, if not the best, secondary in Western New York. So if you have the passing game of Starpoint versus being the defensive backs against West Seneca West, I think the Indians prevail in any matchup.
I think the Indians come into that game daring them to run the ball. Daring them to run. There was a couple times last week, and a number of times I saw in Starpoint where they only lined up with 3 men on the offensive line. I mean, this kid had all day to throw against McKinley. Chase did. I know he had a 4 or 5 touchdown day, but literally every player he threw to was wide open.
Right.
You're not going to have that with West Seneca West for reasons you've already mentioned. So they have to establish some kind of running game. I think without it, it's going to be just like that. It could very well turn out to be like that West Seneca East Starpoint game.
Well, when you take a look at Liam Shore, who was all West New York last year, first team, and Mike Linsky, outstanding linebacker, should be first team all West New York this year. He's got 80 tackles or 90 tackles. And when you take a look at just the strength of that team, they don't have any weakness, whether it's offense, defense, special teams. They also have a winning culture, outstanding coaching staff. Mike Pistola, to me, is like Alex Cora of the Red Sox. He's the last couple of years, he pushed all the right buttons, made all the right calls, and I think it's going to be very difficult. But the one thing that you never know what the weather's going to be like. One thing you don't know is every team sometimes a little different as far as what kids come to play. Every team in a championship game like this needs everyone to come to play.
Yep, everyone has to be firing on all cylinders.
Yeah.
From the line all the way through the skilled positions, and no one's safe. You can't hide in these games. You just can't hide.
Well, particularly when you take a look at West, they won 23 straight games, so they're up there and they're number 1 in the state also. So it'll be, to me, an interesting matchup, but I really think that the Indians have an edge going into this game.
I would agree. Grand Island escapes the 2-7 matchup with South Park last Friday, 38-32 overtime winners against South Park. And, Grand Island really rose to the challenge Friday. They played with heavy hearts. Obviously right. The AD's lost his daughter, a teacher there, and coach, so that was tough on the entire community up there. But those kids, they balled out Friday, and they won that game fair and square as far as I'm concerned.
Well, when you take a look at the game, and it was not a really outstanding played game. South Park lost for 3 reasons. Grand Island wanted it more. South Park had 10 penalties, and their kicking game was atrocious. They gave the Vikings good field position the whole game, and you can't do that.
Huge.
And there was a huge mistake, or fumble recovery, and being allowed to tie the game and then go into double overtime. But one stat that's amazing to me is at the end of 3 quarters, Grand Island had -3 yards rushing. When you take the 4th quarter, the offensive line all of a sudden said, I don't like this stat. And they came out and they played physical football, and with Kenny Yoki and Brandon, I think it's Peter Bella, and the other offensive linemen, they were able to get crucial first downs, control the clock, and actually should have won that game in regular time.
You said it best. You said it best. We can leave it at that. Grand Island won fair and square. We know why South Park was unable to You can't overcome 10 penalties.
No.
Not in playoffs. Not when you're giving a team half a field to work with all night long, and then you have a veteran quarterback like Siako.
Yeah, plus Cam Siako and Justin Gorel. Justin had 10 receptions, 150 yards, the winning touchdown in the second overtime. Cam has just played exceptional ball, so they have a shot in this game, mainly just because I think that they have a lot of confidence. They overcame adversity last week, and able to pull out the game in overtime, and Cam gets better in every game.
Which leads us to our next and final contest on Friday night, a 7 p.m. game out at West Seneca East, where they will be playing Grand Island. The Trojans beat Kenmore West 42-7 last week, and that offensive line just seems to get better and better each week. And so does Dolak to some degree. If he can possibly get any better, he seems to do something different each week, to help lead his team into the next round. To me, I mean, obviously West Seneca East is going to be favored in this game, even though they're not the lower seed. But with what Grand Island just did last Friday, that definitely opened up some eyes. And when you have that extra motivating factor that they have now, playing, as a family, so to speak, sometimes that can take you to even higher. That could take you to places that most people didn't think you can reach.
Yeah.
And what they did last Friday night was just amazing. For West Seneca East, the only way I think they lose this game, though, is if they're looking past Grand Island. And I don't know if South Park did that. I don't think they did. I don't think Tim Delaney will allow them to. But if West Seneca East is looking past Grand Island, they're never going to make it to New Era Field. So if they come out focused and ready to play, they have a chance to do that. If they're not focused, and if they're looking at that rematch with West Seneca West, they better put that thought out of their mind.
Well, this game is also being played at Grand Island,
Yeah, correct.
Which is, good for the Vikings. And I believe that this game's a toss-up. And Dolak is a one-man wrecking crew in every phase of the game. And you look at what other offensive player is going to pick up to help him get the Trojans, to a victory. The key is their line. It's still exceptional. Him on both sides of the line has got to be considered for first team out Western New York. They've got 2 or 3 other players. Dylan McNulty, not only an outstanding defensive end, caught a touchdown pass last week, was probably going to be in his memory bank the rest of his life. So, again, it's a toss-up, but that's why they play the game.
Certainly. I don't think East overlooks them. I don't think Coach Marino will let them do that, but we're still talking about 15, 16, 17-year-old kids, and West Seneca East wants another shot at West Seneca West in the worst way. So my advice is don't overlook Grand Island.
I agree, and I've seen it in the past where teams came in with, high expectations, mainly because everyone was saying they were going to win and they wound up losing. and whether it was they were, did not get ready for the game, or it was bad coaching, whatever. The bottom line is, you got to play every game like every ball. Not only big game, you got to play every play the best that you can.
I couldn't agree more. Well, that's we're going to come back in just a moment and get into Class A and Class B, but plenty to talk about still on this episode of High School Football Weekly, so we'll see you in just a moment.
The North End Bar and Grill in Kenmore is the perfect place for friends to get together, enjoy a great menu that includes all the local favorites like wings, roast beef on weck, and the best Friday fish fry in town. Serving daily specials like spaghetti and meatballs, flavorful hamburgers and barbecued ribs, and enjoy 12 beers on tap, including IPAs. The North End Bar and Grill, located at 2692 Elmwood Avenue near Girard. To order takeout or to reserve a table, give us a call at 877-9000 or visit us on the web at northendbarandgrill.com.
Welcome back to WNYAthletics High School Football Weekly. I am Frank Wolf, joined by Dick Gallagher from WGRZ High School Sports. Dick, we just finished up talking about the Class AA and Class A. We are moving down to Class B and C. So I'll start with Class B. Albion, the number 1 seed, gets by Lackawanna 34-14 last week. I don't think we were surprised by that. We expected Albion to win that game. Cheektowaga, they will meet on Friday at 7 p.m. They are the home team. The Warriors get by Dunkirk 40-8 last week. Albion, Cheektowaga on Friday night. In Albion, the Purple Eagles have a chance to beat Cheektowaga.
I think Albion has been on the radar screen. They're number 2 in the Buffalo News small school poll, and they've won every game and they've dominated most opponents. And they're very physical, and Bryce Pritchard is really an underrated quarterback. He gets it done through 3 touchdown passes last week. Then if you look at their line, particularly Ben Recibo, they're good. Cheektowanga's strength has been their defense and Keyshawn Beal. And last week you mentioned that he was on a path to have similar stats as he had last year, which he had was over 3,000. You take a look at, he's probably going to be putting up the most stats of any player that's ever played for a 2-year period, because he's just a sensational athlete. He's not the typical quarterback. He's not 6'2", 6'3". He's built like a linebacker, but he's got an arm, he's got legs. It's hard to tackle him, and so I think it comes down to, as long as Warriors do not commit penalties or have turnovers, they should be able to prevail in this game, mainly because the defense has given up, I think, 66 points in 8 games, and that's their strength. And Tyvon Roach, linebacker, is double-digit figures every game. It's got to be a candidate for All-West New York linebacker, and he's a key defensively, but they also have some outstanding talent. So I think going into this game, you have to give the edge to Cheektowaga. The interesting thing is, Albion has not been in a championship game since 2002, I think it is.
Wow. I saw Albion earlier this year, week 2, play Lackawanna, and I was impressed with the running game there with Eugene Harrison and Brilliance Johnson, 2 very exceptional runners, very fast. They can make plays with their legs. If they can keep the Cheektowaga offense off the field, which is a tall task considering how good their defense is, if they can keep their defense off the field, Albion definitely has a shot at this. Bryce Pritchard, he is an underrated quarterback. He makes the throws that he has to make. They don't ask him to do a whole heck of a lot, but when they do ask him to make plays, he has been able to make them. Yeah. And he plays both ways too, I believe. So he's a very good player. Thing with Albion, I always worry about their size. Do they have enough guys to play late into the 4th quarter? And if Keyshawn Beal is having a good game on running the ball and it's close, I wonder if Albion can hang with them late in the 4th quarter. That's where my concern is. Are they big enough, and can they play late into the 4th quarter
with a team like Cheektowaga? Brilliance Johnson had 200 yards rushing. Harrison's stats the last couple of games have not been anywhere consistent with the first 4 or 5 games plus last year when he excelled both sides of the ball. So I don't know if there's an injury to that. Adam Brenning is in his second year. He's really turned that program around. They were dominant for decades with Dick Domenico. But now I think that they're very competitive. They're very confident. They'll be playing at home. It's a tough place to play. Cheektowaga better bring their A game.
I agree. On the other side of that bracket, you've got Fredonia Brockton. They beat Maryville 14-0 last week, and Pioneer rolled over Olean 42-7. Let's talk about Pioneer first. You continue to see how dominant a player Mike Riggerman has been all year, and a huge shout out to Riggerman. I believe he was in the top 3 Max Preps Plays of the Week last week. He had a run where he had to hurdle over a player and then get down to the goal line and score a touchdown. I believe it was a top 3. So shout out to him. Coach Dupree has done a very good job. They had to win over Cheektowaga. Their defense is, in my opinion, just as good as Cheektowaga's. I like the Pioneer defense. And you couple that with the running style of Mike Riggerman and his no-quit attitude, Pioneer is going to be a tough fight for anybody, including Fredonia, on Friday night. Now, Fredonia, they are playing this game down at the Orange Bowl, I believe. Maryville struggled there. There's no other way to say it, but Maryville felt cheated in that game. There's a lot of comments going back and forth about officiating, and maybe that's true. I don't know. I wasn't there. I've seen a little bit of film so far. From what I've seen, you still have to play the game. You can't let the officials beat you.
Well, when you look at Rashad Law, who's one of the top players in Western New York, 2 long touchdown runs, both get called back with penalties, drop passes, plus other penalties. They shot themselves in the foot, and they should have won that game. And it's unfortunate, but they're 5-3. Their season's over unless they're playing a matchup game this weekend. And when you take a look at Maryville, lost in overtime by 1 point last year in the section championship. They had most of his kids coming back this year, so it was
tough loss.
It was a tough loss, and actually, if you talk to the coach from Fredonia, he'll admit that they played their worst half or 3 quarters of a game. They didn't do a lot of things right. If they play the way they played against Maryville, they're not going to match up whatsoever with Pioneer. And Pioneer scored 33 points on Cheektowaga, shut them out. And when you take a look at the line of Pioneer, which is under the radar screen to a certain extent, with Trevor Smith, 6'4", 250, Denton Tilley is a junior, 6'4", 250. He's an outstanding offensive and defensive lineman. And Jim Dupree's been around. He knows what to do. When you have a player like Mike Riggerman, it's no different than any player that is better than almost everyone else. He can take it to the championship game. And the South Park quarterback a couple years ago, 2015, took that team to a state championship mainly because he was better than anyone else. He is the best player. I think he's got to be one of the favorites for Player of the Year. You take a look at his stats. Defensive, he's got double-digit tackles. If you take a look at his touchdowns, most rushing yards, and the most physical, most versatile, and never comes off the field. At halftime, he probably sells popcorn, but it'll be a fun game. But I really have to give the edge to Pioneer on that.
I would agree. I know Fredonia, they're playing in down in their house. Orange, at the Orange Bowl. If it's a rainy game, wet rainy game, I think that evens the playing field a little bit because Fredonia's got a good running back too in Joel Colon. They have a nice little quarterback there and a nice tight end, a big target there in Skinner, and they also have a very good defense. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. That's definitely a game I would love to be at. that I've already committed myself to Southwestern, so that's where I'm going, because I don't like to break promises. I promised those kids I'd come down and do a game, so that's what I'm going to do. But Pioneer Fredonia might be that game of the week, specifically in Section 6 for the playoffs. I think there's going to be a lot of people very interested in that game. It's possible it might be live streamed. I know they do that down in Fredonia. They live stream it, so I'm going to hopefully, if we get that website address, I'll send it out to everybody, because that's a game I'm going to want to watch.
Yeah.
So we got, in Class B in the Chuck Funky Bowl, Newfane got by Iroquois last week 54-22, and Medina Lindenville Barker, they beat Burgard 28-22, so they'll meet in the Chuck Funky Bowl Class B championship there. In Class C, Cleve Hill 32-6 last week over Chautauqua Lake on Saturday, and then Randolph-Roosburg defeated Akron 21-12. They'll meet up this Saturday at Cleve Hill. That game will be played at Cheektowaga. I got an email from Ken Stoll earlier advising of the scheduling change there. They are at Cheektowaga this week. So Cleve Hill gets Randolph-Akron. Cleve Hill has some real studs on that team. You've talked about them every week, how fast those running backs are. Randolph-Akron has a pretty tough front seven, pretty good defensive line there. Can they shut down that running game of Cleve Hill?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
You take a look at, they're both over 1,100 yards rushing with Javon Thomas and Aaron Whaler. They both are outstanding defensively, particularly Thomas's stats defensively in last week's game. And if you take a look at Chris Yam, who's also a part of that relay team that won the state championship, he's got almost double-digit tackles. And then their line is a lot better in week 8 than it was definitely on week 1, week 2, particularly when they played Wilson. I just don't see Cleveland Hill, who's been out on a real run the last 4 or 5 years, got to the state semifinals. Last year they thought they could make it to the championship game. They lost the game, I think it was 55-49 or something. They had unbelievable amount of yardage. So I don't think, the only team I think that stops Cleveland Hill in being able to get the championship game would be themselves, and they don't do that on Graham.
No, not too often they don't, and I think I'm going to agree with you. I think Cleve Hill should get by Randolph-Akron. There were just too many games this year with Randolph-Roosburg where I thought they were a little inconsistent.
But the Randolph won, came back and beat Akron without their starting quarterback and the 2 starting running backs who didn't play in the game. Brent Brown inserted a sophomore, Skylar Wright. What does he do in his first game? 271 yards rushing, leads them to a comeback victory over Akron.
So that's an unknown.
Right.
Not a lot of film on this kid. But still, Glenn Graham, Graham's going to have his hands full with him, no doubt. But we'll have to see. I just thought Randolph-Akron for me was a little too inconsistent, coming all the way up to Cleve Hill to play on a Saturday. It's an early start to the day for them. It'll be tough for them to get by Cleve Hill because Cleve Hill is at New Era Field every single year. Everyone knows that. Maybe that's all the motivation that those kids need at Randolph. Who knows?
Plus they got the new complex.
They got the new complex. But they are playing at Cheektowaga this week.
They are?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I didn't know that.
Ken Stoll sent an email out this morning advising of the change, so they are going to be at Cheektowaga, which is a new complex in itself.
So they still have the turf.
Yes.
Yeah.
On the other side of the bracket, Dick, we've got Southwestern, who just beat Gowanda Pine Valley 49-0. They're going to be taking on Wilson, the Lakemen, who got by Cassadaga Valley Falconer 40-12 last week. So Southwestern and Wilson, this is their 3rd time meeting in 3 years in this exact game. Last year losing by a point. Southwestern, they're just a phenomenal team. Between Cole Snyder and Alex Card, the best quarterback wide receiver tandem perhaps in the state. They're going to have their hands full of Wilson. That team does not want to lose again to this team in this game. Those kids have to be up for it. There's no other way. I mean, this is it, especially for a quarterback like Frericks and Drew Westmoreland. This is their last game for Wilson if they don't beat Southwestern you know they're going to want to give it their all. And those kids don't quit either.
And Frericks is not only an outstanding quarterback, outstanding defensive player. When they started the season, I don't know what their numbers now. They had 21 players in their roster, yet they're now 7-1, and they are coming back to play Southwestern. Both teams are very familiar with each other and how they play. And Cole Snyder did not have his usual game, along with Alex Card last weekend. They ran the ball more than they usually do. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out at the game. But Coach Snyder, who's already got a scholarship to Rutgers and is one of the Player of the Year contenders, he comes to play. And I think that the Trojans better not underestimate Wilson, because Wilson can surprise them. They're physical, they never quit, and they play smash mouth football.
I don't think there's any way Coach Kalkrick lets them overlook Wilson, but still, the Lakemen don't want to lose this game. Not again. They have high aspirations. They've had them all year, going all the way back to Lancaster 7-on-7. They knew that the only way for them to get to New Era was to get through Southwestern. They knew that. So they've got what they wanted. Can they rise up to the challenge? We'll have to see. That is one heck of a drive down to Southwestern. It's a long bus ride. We saw what happens to the team on long bus rides. They lose focus. I don't think you'll see that with Wilson.
Well, Southwestern, everyone knows about Snyder and Card. What they don't know about is Cooper Penaz, who's an outstanding lineman, Faison Manure, also Faison's brother, Zizan, who excelled last week on both sides of the ball. They have other key players also on both sides of the ball. So it's not just a two-person or two-man operation. They've got a quality team, and their offensive line, very underrated, getting better and better, and they demonstrated that last week, and their defense shut down. They also, with the offensive line playing the way they did, got 49 points on the board.
Yeah. It'll be a great game. In the Funky Bowl for Class C, it'll be Portville against Franklinville-Ellicottville. How about the way Portville has turned their season around with a brand new coach and everything, and they're going to get into the Chuck Funky Bowl championship? I'm very impressed with what Portville's done late in the season.
Josh Brooks has taken a team that I don't think won a game in 3 years or 2 years, and now I think he's won 3 games and being able in the Class C. And a lot of these teams in the past, they win a Chuck Funky championship. It sets a tone, and you can see the success of some of those teams over the years.
Absolutely. So that'll do it for Class all the way from AA all the way down to C. We're going to take another break on High School Football Weekly. This is Dick Gallagher. I am Frank Wolf. We'll be back to you after a break. Welcome back to High School Football Weekly. I am Frank Wolf, joined again by Dick Gallagher from WGRZ High School Sports. We are on to Class D. The brackets are out, and Clymer Sherman Panama, the 8-0 Wolfpack, they have the 1 seed. They'll take on Cat Little Valley Saturday at 1:30 p.m. And their opponent, the winner of that game, will go on to play the winner of Maple Grove Salamanca. They play Friday at 7. It's a rematch from last week in which we saw Salamanca take down the Red Dragons. Were you surprised by that?
Very surprised, but then when you take a look at Salamanca, has won 3 of the last 4 games. They also defeated Olean, I think it was 24-12 a couple of weeks ago. And if you take a look at Paul Haley, the coach of Salamanca, Dylan McCauley was the kicker. I don't think he tried a field goal all year, but he's wanted to. They're losing 22-21. There's 3 seconds left in the game, and McCauley hits a 27-yard field goal. They win, which was the upset of the week. And it'll be interesting when you take a look at that. It's hard to beat a team once, never mind twice, and then they got to play if they get Maple Grove and CSP in the championship 3 times.
Yeah.
But those teams are also playing now for the 3rd time against Salamanca, as well as CSP and Cattaraugus.
The way the Wolfpack have played all year, I mean, nothing's a guarantee, but you got to believe they should be able to get over the hump and make it to New Era this year. I mean, you only have 4 teams down in D, so it's not like they've had to play 20 different teams this year or whatever. They've had I mean, other than Maple Grove, they really haven't been battle tested too often. So we'll have to see. I don't see them losing on Saturday. You know, that's if CSP loses, it's because they fell apart. I don't see that happening under Ty Harper.
No, and if you look at it, CSP is number 1 in the state, Class D. They've held that right at the beginning of the season. They have an outstanding team balance. You got players from 3 different teams that they've gelled. Ty Harper's done an exceptional job in the last few years. And if you take a look at that team, they don't have a weakness. If you look at Garrett Hinsdale, only as junior, he'll be over 1,000 yards rushing. Take Derek Eklund on both sides of the ball, and then many other players. But if you take a look at Cattaraugus, they're not going to be a matchup.
It'll be tough.
They lost 40-0, and if you take a look at it, same team, and I wouldn't be surprised if Ty has his starters out after the first half to get them ready for the championship game. And as far as the other game, Maple Grove, when you have 2 players like Easton Tanner and Carson Chris, then you have Tage White, and you got a couple of other defensive players. I just think that they lost the game last week. Justin, the coach, is definitely going to make sure they don't lose it next week. So it'll be an interesting matchup, but I still think that Maple Grove and CSP will wind up playing in the championship game.
I couldn't agree more. I do like CSP and Maple Grove moving on this week. You know, the one thing about Harper that impressed me, it's hard enough for a coach to get all the players from one school in the same team. You know, no one's ever going to always like everybody, right? There's always going to be a guy that you just don't care for. Happens in every locker room. So Cheektowaga, for example, everyone in Cheektowaga, they know each other. They see in school all day. Clymer, Sherman, Panama. Some kids are at Clymer all day. Some are at Sherman. Some are at Panama. Basketball season, mortal enemies. Baseball season, mortal enemies. But now you got to play on the same football team. The same flag, the same banner. You're all part of the pack. That's tough to get all those kids in the same, because a month from now they're going to be playing basketball against one another.
And if you look at the mergers, East Aurora and Holland had one of the more successful ones for a number of years. And then if you take a look at this merger, which happened years ago, and when you take a look at it, it allowed these kids the opportunity to continue to play football and to be able to just work out the transportation issues, to do everything they have to do to make it happen. As you mentioned, just to have a culture that's a winning culture. Ty's done an exceptional job and should be considered for one of the Coach of the Year awards.
I would agree. So that's going to do it for all of our classes. Monsignor Martin, Canisius, with their win over St. Francis last week, they secured the #1 overall seed. So St. Francis and St. Joe's will battle out for the AA in the AA playoffs round 1. They have one more week of regular season, and then they're going to play in the playoffs. And again, Joe's and Franz will match up for the second time this year. The winner to play at University of Buffalo against top-rated Canisius. And then in League A, Bishop Timon is the 2 seed right now, with O'Hara the 1 and St. Mary's of Lancaster the 3. O'Hara plays Canisius this Saturday, and I believe Joe's is playing St. Mary's.
Right.
So that would leave Franny's and Timon to play one another, then I would imagine. I got to look at that schedule to make sure, but I'm sure that's what it is. So it'll be an interesting final week of the Monsignor Martin. I'm looking forward to their playoff matchups. Bishop Timon will have to play St. Mary's again to see who plays Cardinal O'Hara for the League A championship, and then St. Joe's and St. Francis.
League B.
League B?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And then we'll have to see what transpires there. Again, those 2 games will be played November 11th. I believe that's a Saturday at University of Buffalo. We'll have the Far West Regionals going on the same time. So we'll have to see how WNY is going to cover that one. if you had to go, your choice between Monsignor Martin Championship and Section 6, I hate to put you on the spot, but where do you go? I don't even know what I'd have to flip a coin, I guess.
Well, I just think it plays out. So, I mean, some of the teams you expect to be there don't make it. Some of the teams you didn't make it. So I think it's a matter of just waiting to see who wins and what games. The one thing is that we know, trying to cover high school football when you have 71 teams, there's always games every week that you want to be at. Sometimes 4 or 5 of them, you can only be at one. Sometimes you get to see, 2. And the most I ever did in one weekend, which would never happen again, was very much like in the 80s. And I saw 11 games, but they had games Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And it's not like you sat through 11 games. It's
right,
like went through a quarter, went through a half, but never again did I try to do that. And if you take a look at the Monsignor Martin, this week I think St. Joe's should, defeat St. Mary's. And Cardinal O'Hara St. Francis game will be interesting because O'Hara's got some good players. Plus, Cardinal O'Hara played St. Francis 4 or 5 weeks ago at St. Francis. St. Francis won by a couple of touchdowns.
Canisius and O'Hara.
I'm sorry, Canisius
and O'Hara, yeah.
O'Hara. And then Canisius should be able to, to take them. But if you look at the playoffs, and particularly in League A, Canisius got the #1 draw. I'd favor St. Joe's over St. Francis, even with Ritz and Thomas.
Is that because of the defense? St. Joseph's plays a better line and better defense?
Well, I think better line, better defense, but I think also that last few games, Jimmy Scott came to play, David Morgan came to play, Micah Brown had 4 touchdowns. I think they got a lot of confidence. And then particularly when they game against St. Francis, which they won 43-41, they held on to the ball, controlled the clock with that line of Doty, Gambino, McDonald, and that, I think, gives the edge to St. Joe's. And even if St. Joe's goes against Canisius, St. Joe's in the last 2 games against Canisius should have won both of those games. So that game for a championship would be a toss-up. Even with the winner, going to be able to then play for a state championship. In the other game, when you take Timon and what they did, against St. Mary's, Mitch Steele is a quarterback, very underrated. In that game, if Timon gets to play Cardinal O'Hara, to me that game will be a toss-up. And you have 2 outstanding quarterbacks, 2 outstanding teams. So I just think it's going to be a fun period.
Yeah, for O'Hara, he hasn't gotten as much love as other wide receivers have across Western New York, but Jermaine Hayes is a major threat on that O'Hara offense. He's a key player, and I think if he has a pretty good game this weekend against Canisius, that'll bode well for him and maybe get some more chatter in the all-Western New York talk. But there are some phenomenal receivers throughout Western New York, but this is one of them. You just don't hear enough about them, I don't believe, because they play so many games out of state and a lot of non-league games, so you don't see a whole lot of Jermaine Hayes, but he is a force to be reckoned with.
And according to Shaquille Dudley, the head coach, Jermaine is their most explosive offensive player. And if you take a look at trying to figure out who's going to be the wide receivers for all Western New York, you have 8 possibilities. All 8 would deserve first team. Justin Garrell comes to play, Jermaine Haynes, Justin Johnson, Dominic Thomas, and there's other, key wide receivers. And the interesting thing is, all Western New York, when you do first team, you have 4 or 5 offensive linemen, but you only have 2 receivers. You have 3 running backs, so you're limited as far as how many people you can put on a first team. So you try to do the best of the best, and a lot of times, people who are not even on the all-Western New York thought process, all of a sudden are part of a team and excelling in the playoffs, state playoffs. All of a sudden they get a championship. All of a sudden, guess what? They went from the outhouse to the penthouse.
I'd rather have the championship.
In a heartbeat.
I'd rather have the championship. That they can never take away from you.
Well, I played in one championship game, I coached several in championship games, but I played in one championship game in Boston, Massachusetts, for the state title for the cadet division. It was 12-14 for baseball, and it was 2 out of 3. And in the 50s, you just played baseball. Your parents weren't involved that much. There was no garbage going on. It was just fun. Every day you played 6-7 hours of baseball. We wound up losing both games in the state championship, 2 out of 3. When you look back, it was like you still had that memory. You still know exactly. My brother was an outstanding athlete, and he was a pitcher, second baseman. But the neat thing is, when you win a championship, no one can take that from you. And when you're having bragging rights, it just, what could happen in the A's, you could have another battle between West Seneca East and West Seneca West, where you had bragging rights in the rivalry game. Well, guess what? The rivalry game is over here now. If they wind up playing for the championship, it's going to be for all the marbles, all the bragging rights, for the rest of their lives.
Yes. And a lot of times, you don't even remember who you beat. You know, you often forget about who the runner-up was that year. You always remember who the state champion is. I almost forgot who won the Class AA championship last year. It was, I believe, Troy, right, from Albany? But all I remembered was Lancaster was in the game because they're from here. But if I was from Troy, I bet they forgot who they beat.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things, too, is you work all year. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you had a 3-month season for football. Now it's 12 months with everything that's going to do. So you're doing that, and then you come up close, like Maryville last year, in overtime, losing by 1. Well, it just shows every player has to make every play the best they've ever done if they want to continue playing for a sectional championship and a state championship.
Certainly.
Before 2000, I think it was 8 and 9. 2008 and 2009, Section 6 won 4 of the 5 games against Rochester, only losing B. And they wound up with 4 state championships, both years. Before that, Rochester was dominating us. As soon as 2008 and 2009 was over, if you take a look at 2008 to 2018, or 2017, we've won 65, 70, 75% of the games with Rochester. All of a sudden they clicked in. Not only important to win a sectional title, but it's all extremely important if you want to try and move to a state title.
You got to get through Rochester.
And you got to get through Rochester. Then after that, we've had an outstanding record in getting through semifinals and also winning state championships once we get there.
Well, that's all the time we have for Inside High School Football Weekly this week. We will be back next week. It's New Era Field or Bus for 10 teams, right?
Right.
It's New Era Field or Bus, so we'll have to see who makes it there. And then in the Monsignor Martin, they've got one more week in the regular season before they head on to the playoffs to close out the 2018 season. For Dick Gallagher of WGRZ High School Sports, I'm Frank Wolf from WNYAthletics. We'll see you next week from New Era Field.
Today's show is brought to you by Scroy Financial of West Seneca, the Paul Wolf Agency in Kenmore, CSA Prep Star, the North End Bar and Grill, Cipriano Realtors, BuffaloSportsPage.com, and by Southtown Trophies in Orchard Park, New York, a proud sponsor of the Buffalo Sports Page Athlete of the Week Award, announced each week on BuffaloSportsPage.com.